Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist, presented by Community America Credit Union. I'm Joel Goldberg, and I've got an incredible guest today and a perfect way to wrap up season 6 of Rounding the Bases. It's amazing to think this started back in November of 2017, and here we are hundreds of episodes later. There'll actually be a few more episodes in this season and this year, but there'll be best of episodes from the season, then give my team a bit of a break for a couple of weeks. I guess give myself a little bit of a break too with the holidays, and then we'll be back with a big time guest to kick off season 7 and 2022. But that's what we have here today. And every now and then you meet someone who sets sky high expectations and shatters them nonetheless. Today's guest is one such example. Before we hear his story, I want to share a powerful quote which goes like this: most winners win by being consistently good. Few people have the discipline to put in the work to be consistently great. If you could do that, you'll separate yourself from the pack. Out of context, you might think this was an inspiring comment about perhaps baseball, but in actuality, it was authored by the person joining me in our virtual studio today. Peter Mallouk is the president and CEO of Creative Planning, a New York Times bestselling author, all-around epitome of excellence. He's also a part owner now of the Kansas City Royals. Even by his own exacting standards, he has no shortage of accomplishments, from his top-ranked wealth management firm to his passionate commitment to bettering our community and helping so many causes. Peter sets himself apart on the regular, all with a rare sense of grace, humility, and dedication. The only thing he can't do, it seems, is settle for less than the extraordinary. It is a long way of me bringing in one of the most down-to-earth and humble guys that I have met, Peter Mallouk. Peter, how are you?
Hey, it's great to be with you, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you too. And there are a million things that we could talk about, and we do have to talk about some baseball as well. And we'll certainly talk about wealth management. I want to talk about your book a lot, but I'm guessing this is a question you get asked a lot, and I am to some version. I get asked this too. Sometimes I think there are assumptions that are made. Like in my case, he's on TV. He must be fill in the blank, whatever it is. Full of himself, or he must think he's big. And then they say, wait a minute, you're just a normal guy. And in your case, you've been extremely successful and you've done so much and still doing so much. And I'm guessing people say, well, wait, he's the big time. And yet I watch you treat everyone completely normally. You're a just everyday guy. I'm guessing you get that a lot. And I'm wondering how important it is to you in terms of who you are and maybe having not changed a whole lot.
Well, I think I'm smart enough to know that I'm good at this one thing. You know what I mean? And that when you accept that some of those things, there's some skill to it, but a lot of it is attributable to luck. And I happen to be good at something that society really rewards. Do you know what I mean? And just like a Major League Baseball player, if you can be in the top, 1/1000th of 1% there, you could really get rewarded. But you could be amazing at a lot of things and not get rewarded and in the way that I have been. And I just feel like everyone that I encounter, and I've learned this from my clients, I love hearing their stories. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's had their trials and tribulations. Everyone's got their victories. But the main thing is there is literally no one you can't learn something from. I mean, you can learn something from everybody you encounter. I've watched you in conversations with people. You quickly go, everyone wants to talk about you because you're on TV and associated with the Royals, but you are quickly turned to try to learn about somebody else. And I just feel so blessed to be sitting where I am. I don't know that I could be any other way.
So what was it about this profession that caught your attention? And yes, you are an expert in a world where there are a lot of, quote unquote, so-called experts, and some are really good and maybe some aren't so good. And the rest of us don't quite know what we're talking about. But how did you get into this and what were the goals?
Well, it was really it's so accidental. It's funny because it looks like, if you look at my education and then my path, it looks very intentional. You get an MBA law degree, which really lends itself to what I'm doing today, which is finance and law. And then you put all these services, wealth, tax, and so on in one place. But it was really very accidental. I only have an MBA law degree because I didn't quite have figured out what I wanted to do. So I stretched out college a little bit more. And then the first couple of years out of college, I just found myself, helping doctors that had questions. My dad was a doctor, and I kind of built a consulting practice around that. And then quickly realized that doctors were taken advantage of, by a lot of advisors, and that were really selling stuff. And between that and doing some wills and trusts, things like that, estate planning for those doctors, next thing you know, I'd built a practice doing that for all kinds of advisors all over the Midwest. And I really learned the profession. And I said, this profession, it's kind of messy. It's not like when you go to a doctor or a CPA and they've got to act in your best interest and there's some alignment there. I mean, really, when people seek out an advisor, oftentimes you're getting advice from someone who you may wind up in a worse position than had you never gone there in the first place. And I really got to see that. I got to see what the right way to do things was, the ethical way to do things. And I got to see, how you make a quick buck selling somebody something and then moving on, even though that's going to be very expensive for that person. And that's what finally opened my eyes to that. And I was in my late 20s by the time I figured that out. And I hadn't even thought about it. And so I just kind of found myself at the doorstep of this profession, more like just seeing what had happened to my dad and my mom with advisors, and not only getting taken advantage of, but finding it very confusing, coupled with my kind of accidental path to this profession. It got me here.
So you clearly developed a passion for this kind of work, but I'm sort of wondering too, and I know that there's a passion for it, but is the passion ultimately just in people, or is it the finance, or what motivates you?
Well, it's definitely helping people. I mean, it's, to me, the funnest part of this whole profession is taking someone or a couple and looking at their situation, everything they have going on, and then being able to quickly say, these are the 6-7 things we can do that really can be transformative for you, where it can really make a big difference to you and your kids, whether it's education or retirement or the charitable things you want to do. And to me, that's by far the best part of my day. Is it today? Before this, that's what I was doing. I was meeting with a new client and going through all of that and helping lay out that pathway, solving those problems. And I tell the people in our office, if you think somebody comes to creative planning, they are working tens of thousands of hours to get what they've got, right? This is not like they're just showing up to get a question answered. They're basically saying, hey, look, I'm dedicating more time in my life to creating this pile of money, and here it is. I'm going to trust you to put me in a better spot. And so to the extent that we can help them with all kinds of things to put them in a better spot, to me, it's an amazing feeling that someone would trust you with all of that, and to be able to go, hey, I want to be the best at that. I want to be the best at helping somebody get in a better spot and putting the solutions together to make sure they get put in a better spot. That's by far the most rewarding part of the job. And with a close second being able to watch people's careers progress and being able to watch them do more than they thought that they could do and achieve more that they thought they could achieve. I mean, that's a close second. But helping that client solve the problem, that's what we think about all day. I think about all day long. What else can I do? What else can we bring in here to help do that?
And of course, the world is always changing. The markets are always changing. And you write a bit about this, a lot about this in your book. I want to get to that in a while. But I want to go back to growing up. And very interesting that you'll now be the second Peter that I have interviewed on this podcast in a major role who happened to work in a Major League Baseball clubhouse. The other being Peter Clune, the CEO of Lockton. We got to talk about that in a moment too, because you guys, as we're recording this, just made some news recently. But both of you grew up working in the visiting clubhouse at Kauffman Stadium, taking care of Major League Baseball players from the other team. And that's certainly a lot different than what you're doing nowadays, although it still gets down to taking care of people. But how, if at all, did that shape you as a youngster?
It was so incredibly eye-opening. I think the first thing I learned really fast is, if you don't ask, you're not going to get. And I remember asking my dad to take me out to Royal Stadium. I mean, this was the mid '80s, and so the Royals they're just amazing. You're listening to the radio, listening to games as I'm going to bed at night. I mean, wouldn't miss anything. And I asked him to take me out there to try to get a job. I was 15, and so I was able to. Back then, you could drive then. And so he drove me out there, and he's like, well, what do you want to do out here? I'm like, oh, well, I'd love to be a bat boy. And he's like, well, you may as well ask. And I just laughed. I thought, well, I'm definitely going to be selling peanuts, right? So I go out there and I ask, and the guy goes, well, we don't have that, but we have a clubhouse job. And I had no idea what that meant. I was disappointed. And then it turned out it was the visitors clubhouse. And so like, oh, I'm not even going to see the Royals. This is terrible. It just didn't occur to me what I was getting. It's the very first day I go in, which, I mean, just the fact that I got that job just still blows me away. And there's, 4 other kids in there, and there's 1 or 2 career people, and you're going there at 4 o'clock, 3 hours before the game, and they get done practicing, and you're washing their clothes and getting them whatever they want. Some of them have pregame ritual stuff they want you to help with, and then you're getting the food at the end of the game. And back then they'd have some beer after the game, and you'd have to drive the ones to the hotel that had maybe stuck around too long. And I just, the experience of watching, I mean, I think 2 things, being able to see that kind of performance up close, like to really see what they're like. It's really hard to get your brain around what you see on TV versus all the pregame ritual and how focused some of them are, how some of them aren't focused at all. They're just so naturally talented. I didn't grasp it. It was the first time I was around everyone that was amazing at something. And I was awestruck. I was there for 3 years, and I was awestruck from the day I showed up till the day I left. It was a great experience. And even as an owner, I haven't been back in the clubhouse. I had more pull as a 15-year-old than I do today.
Well, and, I think as a 15-year-old, you're just sitting there thinking, well, I want to be around George Brett or Frank White or whoever it might be. And you don't understand at that point, you certainly do now, that you can bump into those guys. But now you get a chance every 3 days or, every 3 days of a homestand to see a new superstar, and not understanding at that point leadership lessons or seeing what you're observing in terms of their preparation styles. And you're right. There's some guys that are ritualistic. Alex Gordon, who was the first guest of the season. So we bookend the season with Alex Gordon, Peter Mallouk, and, Alex, legendary for his workouts, for his routine. And you get a guy like Alcides Escobar, who could kind of show up at the last minute, eat some bad food, and go out there and just do his thing. Everybody was different. But looking back, you had to have had so much access to so many different types of people, managers, leaders, and exposure just to different styles.
It was fascinating. Most managers, at least back then, when the game was over, they walked right past the team and went to their office and closed the door. So every now and then you'd see a manager like Valentine, I think he was the manager for the Rangers, who would, after the game, huddle up the team and talk to them. And in my mind before that, I just really had always envisioned there was always constant coaching happening. And, some of them are just, even back then, where it was just all about the numbers and the math. And I've got to tell you, so when you're talking about the rituals before the game, one of my experiences that I'm never going to forget is Wade Boggs had this incredible hitting streak, and he was known for his hitting streaks, but this was one of his epic ones. Of course, they were in Kansas City, and he had this ritual at the time that he had to have chicken before every game. I don't understand it, but we didn't have it that day. And so the manager of the clubhouse gave me the keys to his car and told me to go get some. Well, there's no GPS. There's no cell phones. I have no idea where I'm going, right? I am, and I'm driving around, and I run out of gas in his car. And of course I have to wait until some police show up. And it was literally one of the worst days of my life. And he did not get his chicken before the game. And I just held my breath the whole game, that I was going to get fired. Wade Boggs was going to be, so thankfully he got a hit, I think, in his 3rd at bat, but it made me sweat it out till the end of the game. But there were just so many things like that you really tried to make sure that the players' rituals got followed and their locker was organized the way they wanted and everything else. And I dropped the ball more than a few times there.
Well, and there are a lot of lessons learned there too. You're not going to get it right every single time, but you have this unbelievable job, probably the envy of a lot of your friends as they start to learn about the access that you have and what you're doing. They may not have understood the amount of hours, the crazy hours that you were putting in. But going back, final question about childhood. I mean, I don't know if you could have dreamed up the success that you've had with creative planning at that point. A 15-year-old's not thinking like that. Probably more likely than not, at least at a younger age than that, you're thinking about wanting to hit. I wish I could hit the game-winning home run in Game 7 of the World Series. I mean, a lot of us kids would do that, right? Play that out in the backyards or in the streets or whatever. So what was the realistic dream? I mean, beyond just I want to be a superstar athlete or whatever it might be. What were your dreams as a kid?
You know, for me, I wanted to be entrepreneurial. I mean, I had an entrepreneurial gene early on, and I wanted to find a way to, make something work, but I didn't have any idea what it was going to be. I had no, it was eradicated from my mind really early about being an astronaut or an athlete, or when it was very clear to me that was not the path for me. And so I knew that entrepreneurial, something in business, was the kind of thing that got me excited from when I was very, very young. And so this idea of looking at a marketplace and saying, how do I do something better or faster or with more value than somebody else, and have the market tell you if you're right or wrong, that has always, that's the one thing that's always appealed to me.
So was there a tipping point for you in terms of business, in terms of creative planning? I mean, you guys are beyond on the map at this point, and one of the best places in the country. What changed, or when did it change?
There have been a couple times that were eye-opening moments. And I think the first one was, we were starting in 2004. We were managing about 30 million for 30 clients, and we had kind of come up with this way. And as I'd hired one person at that time, and we had come up with this way to really make it educational for the client. So a very, very big part of what we do is educational. If you can educate somebody, you empower them, right? If you empower them, you give them that certainty to make the decisions they need to go put themselves in a better spot. If you go to a doctor and the doctor can't explain stuff in English and doesn't use any visuals and is fumbling around with the computer, what you're going to go do is you're going to go see 3 other doctors, right? But if the doctor takes you through this process that you trust using the best technology and comes up with 3 solutions and says, this is why we should go with solution number 1, that empowers me to make a healthcare decision that will put me in a better spot. Well, we had come up with a way to do that, and we had taken our original 30 clients back through our new process, and they just referred like crazy. And it was the first moment that I realized, hey, this is not just going to be making a living. I think that I've found a way to do this that I think is really appealing to people, that's really resonating. And I really thought about trying to come up with a process that appealed to my dad, who's an internist, my mom, who's a teacher. And I said, if they could understand it and enjoy it, that probably anyone would, because they're just not interested in finance at all. So that was probably aha moment number 1. And then number 2 was coming out of the 2008-2009 crisis. We were a reasonably sized firm. We were managing about 500 million, but we really, it proved out that the way that we managed money really worked really well. And we were 4 times bigger a year and a half later. And the third has been the pandemic, where I said, hey, we've built a nice firm. If you walked out in the streets in Philadelphia or Los Angeles and said, who's creative planning? If you asked 100 people, probably all 100 would say, I have no idea. So, let's not get carried away with how big we were. We were big in the independent world, but that's still very small compared to the brokerage world, the Morgan Stanleys, the Merrill Lynches and everything. We're 1% their size. But coming out of the pandemic, we doubled in a year, and our clients really became advocates and referred more than they ever had before. And it wasn't the first time that it occurred to us that, hey, we could emerge as a national firm here. And so we've been intentional only about one thing, which is, how can we make what we're doing more valuable for the client? How can we solve more of their problems? How can we create more alignment with them and be better than everyone else that we see in the marketplace? And then everything else, these events we have no control over, whether it's 2008-2009 or the pandemic, create a test point where your clients, they're paying more attention than normal, right? And they've really rewarded us for getting it right in the beginning and setting up a way to solve things with the 2008-2009 crisis, with the pandemic. And that part, those things we have no control over, but the outcome is what has come from all of that. And in all 3 cases, I've been stunned at what has happened, and pleasantly surprised to the upside, and just super grateful for everything that's happened as well.
See, I've thought that the pandemic, as awful as it was, and I really try to, when I'm speaking to audiences, I said this yesterday, I don't want to minimize anyone's struggles or failures during this time. I mean, lives have been lost, jobs have been lost. There's been so much disruption. But I've also felt like, and I think this is the case over the course of history, no matter what we do, that when there are struggles, there's opportunity. And it sounds to me, in the moment, it might not feel like it either. But I think if you push forward, if you go about things the right way, if you keep on, certainly positivity, but I mean, if you just keep on moving and don't wait for things to end, that you can sometimes come out better than you did. And I'm really simplifying, but I'm curious what it was that enabled you at Creative Planning to come out of the pandemic, quote unquote, out of the pandemic in an even better place. What was it, that personal touch of being able to take care of people at their worst times? What was it that enabled you to come out even better?
I told a story at our annual meeting to our team, and I told about David Lee Roth. So he's for your younger listeners, lead singer of Van Halen. And they had this rider in their contract when they were traveling. And it basically said, you got to take the M&Ms and pull out all the brown or all the green or whatever, right? It was one of those prima donna things. A lot of musicians have this when they show up. They got to have these certain things. But they were kind of notorious for it. And it was particularly this M&M thing. And he was being interviewed on a podcast recently. And they said, do you regret being a prima donna, back then and making people do that with the M&Ms? And he said, I'm not touring anymore. So let me tell you the real story there. He said, I would put that in the contract because there were all kinds of safety issues at concerts, pyrotechnic issues and stages collapse. It was a pretty common thing back then. We still unfortunately, still see it today occasionally. And he said he knew when he showed up in the dressing room, if the M&Ms were not separated, that they had not read the contract and that he had to be concerned about everything else. And I think the pandemic was full of those M&Ms, right? I mean, for us, we could do all this stuff for you. But when the CARES Act came out, our CPAs and our lawyers and our planners had something out that same day saying, here's all the laws, here's all the tax changes, here's the financial implications to you, here's how you do A, B, and C, and we're going to help you do it. And so the clients saw firsthand. We could talk about, hey, in a crisis, here's how we're going to manage your money. But then they got to see firsthand. So it was there, people are too busy to really pay attention to anything, right? They're just too busy. And so you get their hyper attention briefly. And those are your chances when you've got that hyper attention to really prove yourself to them. And I think what the pandemic did is, there are people who didn't call their clients. There's people who called their clients and just held their hand. And then there's people that proactively made sure they wound up in the best tax and legal and investment, everything situation you could. And I think our team, really did that. In a way, it's like a sports team. Like we're really set up where there's these subcultures, right? There's the tax group and the legal group and the trust group. But what makes them great is the way they can come together to make that play happen, right? At the end of the game. And I think that they did that. We did that in a way we wouldn't have had the opportunity without the pandemic to really show what the firm was capable of. And I think that we gave those clients that chance to see those separated, those M&Ms, and gave them the clue that, hey, we're able to do what we've told you we're going to be able to do.
Yeah, and in the simplest way, it's funny. I had on a list. I'm always adding to lists, and you bump into someone. Hey, I'm going to have Peter Mallouk on, and I don't even remember who it was now, so I apologize to whoever it was. They said, ask him about the Van Halen M&M story. So that was actually on my list. So you just covered that one. I'll give you this one too. Then the other, my follow up is just, I think it could be summed up real simply. Most of us in life don't either know how to, don't want to, or don't have the time to read the fine print. And when someone can read that fine print for you, that goes a long ways, right? I mean, in terms of trust, in terms of faith in someone and saying, well, they've got my back. I don't need to worry about this.
That's right. And I think, we're looking for these mental shortcuts. When I travel for work, I don't really decide where I'm going to eat. TripAdvisor tells me where to eat, right? And I know that I'm probably, if I go to number 1 or 2 or 3 on TripAdvisor, I'm probably going to have a good meal. I'm probably not going to throw up, right? And if you think about how people make most decisions, some people are very aspirational. So when they're looking for a wealth manager, they're going, I want access to the best alternative investments and a big legal team and this, that, and the other. But a lot of people, it's fear-based decision. they grew up in an financially insecure household. They heard their parents struggle with money. Maybe they're struggling with money, and they're really worried about losing their money, right? Making a mistake, having the Madoff thing, or somebody, everyone's heard the story. I lost everything in 08, 09, or I lost everything in the pandemic. And so the advantage of starting to, having those opportunities to prove yourself where your clients turn into advocates is you get that people can make that shortcut. Hey, the parking lot is full. Probably people are having a good meal. Probably people, aren't throwing up. And I think that's the advantage. That's what, I'm a big believer in cumulative advantage. Once you're ahead, you have more to invest in technology. You have more to attract the best talent. The best talent wants to come to you. And you see that in baseball and you see that in business. And so now, of course, it's a competitive world and something always comes out of left field. But that social proof, that ability to help people make a decision easier, it's a very big advantage. And to really do that, you need your clients to become advocates. That it doesn't work any other way.
And all of this leads into a good culture and the type of people that you hire. The other one I had on my list that I was told was to ask you about the invisible rope. And I don't know what that is. That one I don't know.
So, all right. So, we talk at Creative Planning about all of our clients show up with an invisible rope. So some people, everything could go great. You meet them, everything that they need, Creative Planning does it. Well, it couldn't be a better fit. And if you accidentally misspell their name on an application, they go, you're fired, right? That invisible rope was really short. It's gone, game over. Some people might consider that one of those green M&Ms. And hey, this is a warning. If they can't get my name right on a piece of paper, why am I going to do ABC with them? Other people, everything could go wrong. There's always someone where everything, you mess up the paperwork and then the money doesn't move and then you make a trade mistake and they're still there. They're still happy that, they're doing your best and that their invisible rope is longer. But with every encounter you have with somebody, that rope gets longer or shorter. It never stays the same, right? And I think it's not just, at Creative Planning and with our clients. I think that's in life, right? All of our relationships have that rope and you're trying to make it longer and stronger. And with clients, we say, look, there's all these specialists. A typical client might talk to 7, 8 people. One person can burn the whole rope down. One person can give us a lot of leeway. And so we talk about making sure every encounter is a positive encounter. And I think that that's about execution. Now, the other side is about, being a positive person. The one book we give all our employees when they come to Creative Planning is How Full Is Your Bucket, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And it takes maybe 20 minutes to read. But the premise of the book is basically when you meet certain people, they either fill up your bucket or they drain your bucket. There's no in between again. And so we really try culturally to lift each other up all the time. And we try with our clients, hey, what are we doing to extend that rope, to gain more confidence with them?
It makes me think about when I talk about the topic of positivity in a culture and channeling my broadcast colleague who oftentimes needs an explanation in terms of his quotes, Rex Hudler. This one, though, makes a lot of sense. He's our Yogi Berra, as you know, but he always says they're energy givers and energy takers, right? Those that fill up the bucket and those that empty it out. Before I get to my baseball theme questions, I wanted to ask you about your book. It's been out for a long time, and I know I have a copy that you gave me, The 5 Mistakes Every Investor Makes and How to Avoid Them. It's a quick read, and to me, there's just so much. Like I am not only am I not a financial expert, I would say more times than not I'm a financial idiot, but yet I read through this and there's so much common sense to it. And obviously you need to be an expert to do the things that you have done and that your people do. But I was reminded in reading through this how often people just get the obvious wrong, or they jump for that, whatever the next best thing is, right? I mean, your first chapter, you talk about market timing doesn't work. Well, a lot of people know that, yet people still can't help themselves. It's like people wanting to say, well, if I have the right information, I could beat Vegas with I'm not a gambling man per se, but yet most of them don't. So the book is chock full of so much good wisdom, and I like a lot of fun quotes from anyone from a Warren Buffett to a Tom Petty and everybody in between. But tell me about this book and just sort of the motivation behind it, because to me there was just a lot of good, smart, common sense in there.
I'd been working for clients for maybe a little more than a decade when I wrote that book, and I just basically there were these themes that kept showing up. So you talked about market timing. Everyone, you kind of hear market timing doesn't work, but I'm telling you, everybody does it at some point in their life, and it's one of those things that it does not matter how sophisticated you are or how much money you have. People have this temptation to try to time when they go in and out of the market. And it's such a dangerous deal, because when you think about when you see somebody who says, I lost everything, it's rare, it's hard to lose everything investing. You kind of have to go out of your way. And the number one way is by market timing. So if you were the worst investor in the world and you put your money in the day before the pandemic, well, congratulations, you're way, way, way up. If you put your money in right before the 08-09 crash, well, you're up 300, 400, 500%. If you put your money in before 9/11, in other words, it's if you just put it in and just leave it alone, the longer you're in the market, the more it's going to work. In 1 year, the odds will be positive are 75%. In 5 years, it's 93. In 10 years, it's 98, 99. But what people do is they go like today, oh, the market's too high, I'm going to wait. Or Trump won, or Obama won, or Biden won, or I'm going to wait till I see what the tax bill is, or whatever. Everyone's always waiting for something. That's all market timing. And the key is really to figure out, what do you need and when do you need it? And if I need money in 10 years, it should be in the stock market or in alternative investments. If I need money in 3 years, it should be in bonds. And it should have very little to do with where market valuations are. I mean, a great example is today, the stock market's at an all-time high. And people think, oh, it's just too high, it's got to come back down. Well, that's not what the market does. The market goes up and to the right. It just goes up and down on its way up and to the right. It doesn't go up and down. And if you think about how often a market is positive, or hits a record, it hits a record once every 19 days. And we're surprised when it happens. But if we go to the grocery store and a Hershey's bar or a Diet Coke or a box of cornflakes costs more, we're not surprised at all. But somehow we're surprised and the stock market hits an all-time high. If you think you're going to walk into a grocery store 10 years from now and everything's going to cost more, the stock market probably has to follow that. The two are tied together pretty well. A lot of people think there's a disconnect between the economy and the stock market. And the best explanation I've heard of this, it's not mine. I don't know whose it is, but it's a great explanation, is a man walking a dog. And in this, I'll use myself, because when I walk my dogs, my neighbors all laugh at me because I have the worst trained dogs in the world because I train them, right? So we walk, the dog jumps on me, it runs behind me, runs in front of me, barks at people. It just crazy. My dogs are crazy. So anyway, my dog is basically the stock market, and I'm the economy. I leave my house, I go on this, couple mile journey, and I wind up back at my house. The dog does not follow right alongside me, in front of me, behind me, jumping up and down. That's the stock market. But eventually, the stock market winds up where the economy winds up. It just isn't pretty along the way. And if you can look at it that way, if you can accept, hey, I expect everything to cost more in the future, well, if you own a diversified portfolio, those prices will be higher in the future as well.
We are not wired as a society for the big picture, for the long term, for the marathon. That's one of the beauties of baseball, and why I love baseball too, is it is not a sprint to 16 or 17 games like football, where everything is boom, boom, boom. You have to look big picture, but we're not wired that way. And certainly in the world that we live in, that becomes more of a challenge. My 3 baseball theme questions, and if you've hit on any of these before, we can move on, but maybe not. Professionally speaking, what's the biggest home run you've hit?
I think the biggest home run was having an investment approach that has worked, and being able to figure out early on, how to implement that in a way where everyone's portfolio could be managed differently. And at the same time, to be able to bring legal tax investments, be the first firm to bring all of that together on a national scale. I think by far that's been the thing that I've been, we've seen the most results from. And so in my career, that's the best so far.
How about a swing and a miss, and what did you learn from it?
Okay, I've got so many swings and misses. I think what I would, I was talking to someone a long time ago that I look up to, and he was telling me that when he hires, he looks at this bell curve. He says, most people are in the middle of the bell curve. And of course, you want to hire people in the top 10, 15%, way out on the right. He goes, but you really, really need to avoid that bottom 10%. And one thing we've done incredibly well at creative planning is attract, find, and retain incredibly talented people. I mean, it's pretty common for someone to come to creative and go, I felt like I was the best person where I was. Here I feel average, and we just try to sustain that feeling. But really, if you have a problem person in a high performance organization, it is incredible the impact that person could have. I didn't realize that till years after I had that conversation with that person. But my biggest home runs are developing this system and having the people to implement it. And my biggest strikeouts have been when I've made the mistake on a person we're going to hire, and how much that can slow down the progress of an organization. So I've really gotten much better at screening it. And if I make a mistake, solving it quickly. It's not enough to plant, beautiful flowers. You've got to pull the weeds, and you've got to pull them early before they overtake the garden. And I think that's something I wish I learned a little bit later in life. But my top 5 strikeouts would all be related to that.
Interesting. And then how about small ball? It's a culture question, really. And I know how much culture matters to you, and getting the right people, as you just talked about, which isn't always the best people. They can become the best people, right? But we've seen that forever. Sure, give me the guy that hits 50 home runs, but he's bad in the clubhouse. Certain teams will say, sure, we'll take it, and we'll even pay more for it. And others say, nah, that's going to rock the boat. So I know that culture fit matters to you. That's really what the small ball question is. What are the little things that add up to the big results for you?
I mean, to me, culture is everything, because I'm in a business that's all about people. That's literally all we have, right? So all we can sell is what's, in our team's brains, and the clients need to feel like they care, right? That it's in their hearts too. So we're looking for a very distinct kind of person, and not what you would think of as a typical money manager or hedge fund. So, creative planning has an investment philosophy. We've got people screening those investments. We're really looking for people that are talking to and sitting across the table from a client, whether it's an accountant or a lawyer or a trust officer or a wealth manager or a planner. And for us, I really want to feel that consultative, caring approach. And so at creative, people go through this multi-step process, but I meet everybody at the end, and it's almost a running joke at how short the interview is. But the point is, it's not an interview. The point is, I'm just getting that feeling of, does that person embody those traits that are the creative planning traits that we care about, that I would put in front of my family members or my friends. And, I want to be at a point where if I'm sitting at somewhere and somebody comes to me and says, I'm a client of creative planning, I don't have to think, who are you working with? I just know they're working with a good person, right? That's doing a great job, that's very competent. And I think that culture is like a cake. You can't just put 5 ingredients together. There is an art to it too. And you can't be missing one ingredient, even if it's a tiny, tiny, tiny ingredient. And the things that we care about at creative planning, not everybody cares about. So when you develop a culture, you really want to bring people into that culture that care about those kinds of things. And so for me, it's looking for that consistency and trying to keep that high bar in place. I actually thought it would get harder as we got larger, and it's gotten easier because we have more people to choose from, and we've gotten more, we've gotten better at figuring out what works and doesn't work. But every single person that walks through that door can make the place better, or they can make it a heck of a lot worse. So it's by far the biggest decisions we make day to day.
And I just think it's interesting. This, again, to me is obvious, but always worth a reminder that you just said it's about people. And David Glass, the late owner of the Kansas City Royals, extremely successful businessman, at a level that most people will never experience. You've experienced a lot of that as well yourself. And the first thing out of his mouth was always, it's always about the people. It's always about the people. And he was always taking care of this person, this person, this person. It was never about him. It was always about everyone else. And so I just think that it might seem like an obvious theme, but when that's coming from people that have had the success at the level that the late Mr. Glass had, or that you've had, and many others, there's a lot of truth in there, and it so often can be overlooked. I want to get to 4 final questions as we round the bases. These could be all over the place, but we'll start with baseball. The opportunity to be a part of the new Royals ownership group. What was that like for you? What has it been like for you? I know you're at the ballpark now a lot. I know you're a huge fan, but now you have a piece of this team. It's kind of full circle too.
It's totally full circle. And I just look at, from working in there as a teenager to being able to be there today, to really having a full appreciation as a teenager for the game, and having it, that full appreciation today. And I love Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City is, my parents came here, lived in someone else's, they were immigrants. They lived in someone else's house they didn't know for 6 months. And, we've moved 5 times, and then I went off to Lawrence and came back. And, it's just the Royals are synonymous with Kansas City. And so I like that affiliation with the city as much as I like the Royals. I'm sure that John Sherman, if he were to tell the story about his pitch meetings that he found to be the most hilarious, mine has to be at the top of the list. I mean, when I went and met with him and Brooks, who really, Kansas City can't have a better leaders for the team than, it's impossible. I mean, they're just such kind people that care so much about the city, and they absolutely love the Royals. I mean, he's their first pitch, doesn't leave till the last pitch. But anyway, he goes in there and they've got this, 30, 40 page deck. And he opened the first slide. I said, I'm done. I'm in. I want to do this. He's like, I really think you should look at the president. I'm like, no, I'm good. I am ready to go. I would have, I was just so excited to even have the opportunity. And I still love going out there. And, I remember we were talking about George Brett earlier. I was in the clubhouse, and I got to meet him a few times. He won't remember this, but he had let I know he doesn't remember this because he let some of us use his house one time. And one of my friends got to drive his car, something for homecoming. And, we fast forward to the clubhouse. I see him again for the first time. And I go, hey, George, there's no way you're going to remember me. I'm Peter Mallouk. He's like, yeah, I don't remember you at all. I go, yeah, I used to work at the clubhouse for 3 years. He's like, no, don't remember at all. He's like, what do you do? I'm like, well, creative planning. He's like, no, not familiar. Where is it? And I'm like, oh, his building's on 435 and all. He's like, nope, never heard of it. So it was the most hilarious encounter in the world. But just to see him today versus as a kid, to go from shining shoes in the visitors clubhouse to being able to be in the owner's box, I feel like I'm a spectator and an imposter, but I'm loving every minute of it.
I hope he knows who you are now.
I don't know. Who knows? It's too much fun that he does. It's too much fun that he doesn't. My kids are having a great. They were there for that encounter, and they loved every second.
I'm sure they did. Second question. So let's kind of circle back to where I was before with the two Peters growing up in the visiting clubhouse. And I mean, who would have known way back in the 80s that you would go on to start and be the CEO and founder of the successful company, Creative Planning, and he would go on to be the CEO of Lockton, which was very much on the map at that point as well, another Kansas City institution. Mm-hmm. And the two of you guys definitely didn't know, working in that clubhouse back then, that you'd be making deals together, but you made a deal recently. And I wanted to ask you about that because I know it's something that is important for both companies.
Yeah, I think it's a great story, and I'm still getting my brain around, how transformational this could be for both of us. But, I've known Peter for forever. We went to the same high school. Our kids go to the same grade school, church. He lives a block away, but we probably would only wind up in the same room, once a year. It was one of those kind of relationships. Obviously, to watch him and what he's done, and to be embraced by the Lockton family, which is legendary in Kansas City. I mean, that's not an easy place to become the CEO of. And Lockton was, as a kid, it was an incredible Kansas City institution, and it's really grown from there to be the biggest independent firm in their space. Doing property, casualty, and benefits all over the world. And they also did 401ks and do 401ks because if you're handling somebody's property and casualty and benefits, sometimes it's the same people that handle that. We're obviously in the 401k business because our whole job is get people from point A to point B. If it involves a dollar sign, and a 401k is the way you do that if you're at work. The number one way an American becomes a millionaire, you would not know this on Twitter, because everyone on Twitter is trying to, shortcut it. But the number one way people become millionaire in America is through consistent savings in their 401k. It's that simple. You just take your money, you put it in there, every paycheck, a little bit, diversified portfolio. lean towards stocks over bonds, you'll become a millionaire. And many people, a multimillionaire. So it's a part of what we do. And their plans, they were really dealing with very, very large plans. And most of our plans were from, clients that were individual clients, right? They might have owned a business. They have, 10 employees, or they have 800 employees. Their 401k might be 20 million or 10 million or 5 million or 50 million. Lockton was dealing with billion-dollar plans of Fortune 100 companies. And so, us together in that space is much more powerful because it rounds out their property and casualty and benefits offering as a benefit to employees, and it rounds out our wealth management offering by being able to compete at the highest levels in that space. And so it made both our teams stronger overnight. What we can both deliver to the client has gotten better overnight. And I think it's either one of us could have tried to do that ourselves. And I think there was an acknowledgement from both of us, like, hey, each side had this other piece figured out. It would have taken us years and years to close the gap. Let's get the solution in place for our clients right now. And I think it's been incredibly positive. And I think we're going to go into the new year in a really good shape there.
Well, congrats on that. And I know good things for so many people. Third question as we round the bases, I want to talk a bit about the charitable side for you that you're involved in a lot and giving back. Same you, your wife Veronica, and just kind of curious what stokes that fire. You get asked to do a million things and you get pulled in a lot of directions. I do too. Can you donate this? Can you do that? And I know that that's the case for you, and your name's on a lot of charities as well. But what fuels you on a regular basis in terms of giving back?
From the very beginning, from when we were starting together, Veronica and I, 20 years ago, we've been focused on how do we break the cycle of poverty. So I'd say 95% of what we're doing is trying to do that, whether it's scholarships for kids that are foster kids, or they're homeless, or their parents are in jail, but yet they're a standout in their grade school class. And so we'll match them to a mentor, and many creative planning team members are mentors, which I'm very proud. We sent a message and then it just got 80 plus people to do this. It was incredible, I think, example of what the people in the firm are willing to do. And they get this mentor all the way through high school and college, and then we cover all of their college book supplies and so on. And there's a lot of evidence that if you match them with a mentor, that it will work. And if you don't match them with a mentor, it won't. And, interestingly, I remember as a kid watching Ewing Kauffman on TV. I'm sure I'm going to get some of the facts here wrong. I was maybe even 10 or 12, but he was paying for a whole high school to go to college. And I just remember thinking about how cool is that, Now, my understanding is that didn't work out so great, because you just paying for the school is not going to solve the problem. And that there's been a lot of research since then that we all benefit from, that you have to have a mentor. If it's not a parent, it's not a mom or a dad, there has to be somebody else in that kid's life to get them to break that cycle. And so matching scholarships with that mentorship is an example of the kind of thing that we can get excited about. But anything that we can do to, the world is a tough place, and there is a lottery that takes place when you're born. I'm not, there's this. I look at, like, my luck started before I was born. My mom and dad were in Egypt. My dad had graduated in the top 40 they do it in the country. You would just take a test, and then they ranked you. And based on your ranking, you could go to medical school, or you could go to engineering school, or whatever. And he was in this small group that got to go to medical school. And when he got out, he got this job offer, best paying job he could get in Uganda. And that's where they were going to go. And then, they thought about it. He had 8 brothers and sisters. All of his brothers had moved to Europe or Canada. So he thought he's going to go with his brothers with Canada. And him and my mom go to the Canadian embassy. They wait in line. They don't get to the front of the line by the end of the day. So they just start walking home. They pass the US embassy. No one's in line, but it's open. So they walk in, and the people there go, well, we're limited. We're only letting in doctors, teachers, and engineers. Oh, my dad was a doctor. My mom was a teacher. Less than 30 days later, they were in the United States in a German family's basement, with the classic, couple $100. This crazy story. Now, if that story doesn't happen, I don't have anything. Nothing happens from nothing else really matters. I'm pretty sure the creative planning story does not happen in Uganda. And look, I was born 10 months after they showed up in the United States. So I'm very acutely aware of luck and good fortune. I've been back, to where they're from. Their heritage is Lebanon, Syria, Egypt. I've been back there, and I know I know the consequences of where you're born, what success can look like in different places. And so I think that even within the United States, we have that. And I think everyone acknowledges that. And the only thing I think people disagree on is how do you solve it? But to me, I'm really interested in actionable things where if I'm going to spend a dollar, that dollar is going to be impactful on really either alleviating a little bit of a burden someone's going through today or helping them permanently get out, which is the preferable, because that starts to impact so many more generations. And in Kansas City, it is very easy to find causes. I mean, there are so many incredible organizations that started in Kansas City focused on that community that it's very easy to get involved if you want to.
Great stuff. Last question, the walk-off, and I know you've got to go teach a class. You're coming to me from KU right now, and I don't want to make you late, but I'll wrap it up with that type of question. What is the best advice you could share for a young aspiring entrepreneur or just a young aspiring professional, or doesn't even have to be someone young, someone that wants to take that next step, someone that wants to make that change? What's the simple advice?
So this is such old school advice, and it's, again, not social media advice, but you're living in a place and at a time where if you can just out hustle somebody else, outwork somebody else, it really is enough. There are so many people trying to shortcut the system, right? That are trying to pull an end around. If you can just focus. I mean, if you're really young, no matter how great your business idea is, get a college degree. The number one indicator of future wealth is a college degree. It does not mean that of course you can get wealthy without a college degree. It's just your odds go up a lot. And it can be trade school, but just do something that you've got that in your back pocket. If you're going to go into business, start a business, you need to be able to do something better than everybody else. You need to be able to do it faster than everybody else, or you need to deliver more value than everybody else. If you can't do one of those three things, your business is going to go under, like 75% of businesses. But once you get in a good business in a profession that you like, or you start what you're doing, just out hustle everybody. It is, even at creative planning, where there's this incredible talent. Every time we bring in a class, a couple of people stand out. They're taking that, like at creative, we tell people, go shadow other people. You're surrounded by brilliant people. So bring in 5 wealth managers. The best wealth manager in variable is the one that is shadowing the other ones the most, like taking that extra step, having the humility to learn from others. And that kind of thing is going to get noticed. And so I would focus on those things.
Amazing advice. If anyone wants to learn more about creative planning, they could do so at creativeplanning.com. Peter has a website as well, petermallouk.com, Mallouk. It'll be in the show notes. Peter, thanks for doing this amazing last guest of an episode of 2021. I've really enjoyed getting to know you. We'll continue to do so at the ballpark and out of it. Thanks for all you do, and thanks for spending time on Rounding the Bases.
You're the best, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Peter.